Blessed love and peace. We're almost ready to go. Done blew out the candle, getting ready for the next joint. And then we're just like, let's take a look at things. We did the unthinkable and the unusual, which is actually listen to what we just did. How about that? We. And in doing that, however, we found the third thing, which I did not address. How about that? Address as intended, perhaps. And the third item was piety. It deals with the relationship between man and woman again, but piety, and this is actually important. And interestingly enough, it got overlooked. Udi, how about that? By my own self. Such is the nature. Sukha is the nature. Sacha is the nature. Here we are. Here we go. Here it is. What up? Piety. We were talking before about the nature of man's authority. A woman, a wife, abiding within and obeying within the authority of her husband. The nature of loyalty, fidelity, physically as well as mentally, and the challenges to this and otherwise. We're talking about, again, on another topic, mixed heritageness, mixedness, nature, differences, finding trust, sanctuary, amidst our perceived earthly differences, through transcendence. Finding trust through transcendence. Finding trust through transcendence. Mindful of recent directions. So, and then wiping the nose. And in all of that, there's this experience of piety. Extremely relevant. Particularly because it is understated. Interesting that. Relevant because it is understated. Relevant to discuss because it is understated. And particularly piety within man. Piety within a man. Piety within men. And how to recognize the authority of piety within man, with piety within a man, within piety within men, and how a wife, how women are loyal, have fidelity to the piety, the pious authority within a man. So what we're talking about, this goes back to just, again, personal experience of looking for a wife and being recognized as a man, and not human necessarily, but a man. And as a man, many people have the expectation, he's got to be authoritative. He's got to set the rules. He's got to call the shots. He's got to be like, yo, woman, come here and talk to me. Listen to me. How about that? Don't even talk to me. Listen to me. Do what I say. Here's some money. Here's some food. Here's some clothing. Now listen to me. Do what I want. That's what a number of people, whether they like it or not, expect and need, even in many ways, from a man and a man's authority. And if they're not getting it from that man, then they look for some other man who may be even less agreeable and nice or whatever else, but don't matter because they need that structure and guidance and strength from the predators. Woo, things seem so loud now without the earphones on. Waddy, and I just took this one off. This is probably the one with the mic on too, so that might have affected the audio. So, all that being said, the consideration here is recognizing I feel very removed with the earphones on. I can't hear how loud I am in this room when I have the earphones on. Interesting that. Piety within a man. How to recognize that, how to understand it, how to respect it, how to support it, how to trust within it. because it is not out there in terms of announcing itself and promoting itself and otherwise. It is quieter. It is subtler. It is humbler. It's all those ers. There's some humor and joke in the homonyms of Mandarin and further. But that's the nature of piety. And it can be difficult for people to see. It can be difficult for people to recognize. It can be difficult for people to respect. It can be difficult for people to trust. It can be difficult for a woman to see, recognize, respect, understand, trust, particularly as a prospective wife. How are we gonna get around on your bus pass? Because many women are taught, conditioned, learn certain things to expect and require from a man, just in terms of practicals, support, being providers and security and otherwise. And so how is this man who's like doesn't have this, doesn't have that, doesn't have this and that, and this and that? How is he going to be all this providing stuff? Because many women have less of a knowledge or a familiarity with the ways of piety, the strength of piety. And there's no guarantee, it's no invincibility. Just like money and power is no invincibility or guarantee either. But it's a way of understanding how it works, because it requires, when a woman is joining within that, it requires coinciding discipline, and it's a straight discipline. It's not, I won't say it's not fun, but it's not playtime. It's not. It's like it's significant, and again, it's that duck. When it is seen, when the piety is seen, and it can look amazing. It is amazing. It's miraculous because it's the Most High in action. All thanks and praise. But when kinfolk do see that subtle at the same time, there's even further works underneath the water, paddling, because the walk of a pious man requires a lot of discipline. And the relationship of a pious woman with a pious man, it's miracles beyond the miracles that even a pious man knows. Only a pious woman knows. But a pious woman, a pious man, has some kind of hint and inclination. So all that being said, when relating back into conventional ways and experiences and environments and interactions and communication, and prospective relationship, it's a matter of recognizing again what many people's mindsets are and expectations are. And for those who are so inclined, encouraging kinfolk to, at the very least, recognize the nature and you say the nurture. It's a little bit too poetic, but it's further than saying the benefits of piety. But that's basically what we're speaking to, like what the results or what the environment, what the reaction, cause and reaction, cause and effect, what the effects are of piety, what the conditions, what the surrounding conditions are of piety. It's a quietness, peacefulness. Again, no guarantees, and it's not always just like this. Yet there is a thoroughness and a continualness. There's susceptibility of volatility because the piety of a man is dependent upon his discipline, and if he's off his deen, piety is affected accordingly, and the conditions are affected accordingly. When a pious man introduces a woman into his sphere of interaction and communication and relationship, the woman's actions and the woman's discipline or lack thereof become further infused and proximate with the man's actions. And that affects the experience and conditions of the piety as well, the cause and effect. So, point for that is that for a man who's supposedly pious, endeavoring a relationship and marriage with a woman who is not necessarily literate or as thoroughly literate in the nature of that piety and everything, the discipline that's involved in cultivating that. So as there's an interaction and communication, from the woman's side, just just being literate about what piety is, just regardless of any particular individual man, recognizing like what piety is, and actually believing that there is such a thing, and that there's a legitimacy to such a thing, and there's a benefit to such a thing, just as a phenomenon. Amidst all the hype and everybody's game and this and the other, is there anybody who's genuine? And again, it's not about anybody who's pure, innocent, but like, is there anybody who's actually like that? Or proximate with that, or otherwise? And then, in even like having some kind of trust that a person is actually genuine, that a man is actually genuine in being pious. How does that work? How to trust in that? How can a woman live in that way? I'm talking a little bit in ambiguities now. Factor of fatigue at this point, I think. But that's basically the gist of it. So from my personal experience and whatever, we can talk about introductions. How does a pious man meet a woman at all? Well, usually a pious man exists within a community of piety that's already accustomed to the ways, and so a pious man doesn't even necessarily introduce himself or otherwise. It's just people facilitate, intermediaries facilitate introductions, particularly when it pertains to marriage prospects. In addition, in the tradition of Judaism, there's the role of the shulchan, like a marriage arranger who knows families, this, that, and the other, and there's a formal process of interrogatives, asking questions, and facilitating arrangements. Similar things exist within other traditional communities. Now, in a multicultural setting, that's particularly secular, involving a lot of different ways and just a lot of like contemporary norms of like less rules and formalities in terms of relationship, and even a literacy about like healthy relationships. So in those conditions, then how does a pious man meet and interact with a pious woman? Still working on that one. But one thing I recognize is that for myself personally, I'll speak from personal experience. What I find it's actually challenging because one, there's an onus, that's another thing I'm supposed to share. No, I'm just reminded of that. I don't think I've shared this one yet. I have to think about that. I might have done it, but this is another thing, a very different topic. The word onus is what triggered it, or what reminds us. But for a pious man, in such conditions of contemporary, secular, multicultural kind of environments, there's an increasing requirement for a pious man to be further proactive and self-promotional than what a pious man would otherwise be. Because like I said, usually when a pious man is being pious, he's existing in a community of piety that already knows the signals and sees the subtleties. And so the pious man doesn't have to say, look, I'm being pious. Because it's like, there it is. And that's further integrity with that. But it becomes, in many ways, in a multicultural, secular environment that a pious man actually does have to like come and be like, excuse me, I'm just being pious right now, because people don't, by and large, very often don't have that literacy of like recognizing and don't pick up on the subtleties. And it's not a matter of being greater than or whatever and saying, excuse me, I have a badge. It's a matter of that's just what it is. So, yeah. So when it comes to a relationship or initiating, interacting with a relationship, again, the pious man in a pious environment doesn't hardly at all like go up to a woman and self-introduction and this and the other, because that is in many ways contravening the nature of the piety, because piety is humble and reserved and just kind of like withdrawn. We in the spiritual walk are commanded to be married, to be in a relationship, man and woman, husband and wife, to have children, and bring new life into this worldly realm, and teach life how to walk in a pious way. So in that guidance, in that commandment, there is the requirement of a pious man being further proactive when outside of a pious environment per se, to be proactive in that pursuit of whatever word means marriage that starts with a P. So, it's not prenup. And it's not patrimony either. Matrimony, it's not interesting. Patrimony. Don't even know what actually patrimony necessarily means or is intended as meaning. Anyways, pious man has to be further proactive, and that is somewhat of an infringement upon the piety. So a pious man must be mindful of this, and I'm speaking about myself right at the moment. Particularly, now that being said, my point for this at the moment is this. In being pious, even in being pious, and even in infringing on that piety and being proactive in certain ways, there's still certain things that a pious man is precluded from doing that other men, particularly ones who are masculine and like, yo, a pious man is precluded from doing. What is that? Like, yo, come here, let me talk to you. I can't do that. I cannot do that. I am prohibited. I can't, particularly in an environment where I don't know the person's background. I don't know what their customs are. I don't know what the protocols are. I don't know how women are supposed to be talked to in that particular community. A pious man has to be very mindful of this and not to impose and not to be too presumptuous. So when a woman who is reserved and subtle in her own feminine, beautiful ways, and is accustomed to when a masculine man has an interest, the masculine man approaches and says, yo, let me talk to you. Man, come on, man. Oh, let's go in. And is authoritative and assertive and commanding. Let me get you something. I'll get you something. What you want? Not asking questions, but I'll get you something. That's what a feminine woman, many feminine women who are reserved, beautiful, humble, and reserved, shy, initially, are accustomed to. And even when she's extremely interested in a man, will not go up because she is trained in her own way. She's raised in her own way. But may also be less mindful of piety. And even if she is knowledgeable about piety, there's like those protocols of the pious man and the reserved, humble woman. That there's a lot of space right there where an intermediary, the wing woman, the wing man, whatever, it's not even the shulchan, or however, the intermediary facilitates the introductions and communication, so that once the introductions are had, then the man or woman can communicate directly according to the respective and collective protocols. So without that, again, some may expect the man to step up and be like, yo, be the it's a fine dance. It's a fine dance, what we're saying. So in the meanwhile, we continue. continue on. But the basic point for this is to recognize um, that just because a man isn't like, yo, come over here, does not mean that he's effeminate. And that's an important thing, because in the multicultural secular environment, there is a lot of effeminatness of men, and being uh, subordinate in terms of emotionality and relationality and otherwise. And because of that, there's an increasing normalization in the recent generation and generations of women being assertive, and women taking control, and women like assuming that role of being proactive and assertive, even when not wanting to do that, but just because that's what conditions are. That's how many men are trained in needing and otherwise. An assertive woman who just tells the man like what she's interested, this, that, and the other, and the man just says okay and just continues on. So a pious man might look like that. I may look like that. I may sound like that, particularly in my jokey kind of way. But let's not get it twisted. I ain't perfect, and I am raised in that way of being effeminate. To be honest, I am raised in a way of being chauvinistic as well. I'm mixed, so I'm wrestling with that in a proper balance of how to be, how to do that fine line away from chauvinism into chivalry. How about that? And how to be further proactive in terms of being a protective presence for woman and such. And I require practice. However, it's beyond my individual doing. So, meanwhile, do the best that I can. I'm doing the best that I can. I think that would be Hootie and the Blowfish. Hold my hand. I think that's what it's called. So, anyways, that's the joint on piety. Now, what was the thing I said about? Oh, I gotta remember to do this. What that was? I said, own this. Right. Here, right. Yeah, this is changing the mood right here. This is something very different. And I'm also reminded there was a second joint about the sign that I posted. So I'll do that one first. That might be a beneficial segue to get to the further heavy joint. So I talked about the sign saying that democracy and institutions are feminist expressions of polygyny. I addressed that in the first joint. I just recorded an hour ago. Another post is on the analog board is privilege and freedom are mutually exclusive. Yes or no? We say yes. Why? Because privilege is an experience of exclusivity. Exclusivity necessarily involves boundaries, and boundaries necessarily involve restraints, constraints on both sides in order to facilitate the differentiation. And those constraints are antithetical to the experience of freedom. So regardless of what side a person is on privilege, either way, both sides experience an infringement of freedom, against freedom, upon freedom, away from freedom, whatever that is. So, and that's beneficial for people who consider themselves to be privileged to be mindful of. Because when one is privileged, one is enslaved. Odi, that's a very strong word. I'm trying to think of an appropriate complementary experience of freedom. We can say subordinated, subjugated. We can say subjugated. When one is privileged, one is subjugated. When one is not privileged, one is subjugated. So just recognizing that wherever there's the experience of the phenomena of privilege, there is an impingement on freedom. And again, it's beneficial to be mindful of, because people can be very entrenched within an experience of privilege. But that, again, recognizing what is privilege? Privilege is receiving something that somebody does not actually deserve. Because when somebody does recognize, yo, I deserve this, it's not a privilege. It's like, yo, this is what it is. And in experiencing, and that's such a subtle, it's actual fact, it's facts. When you look at, like, when you process the definition of privilege, and it's a mind game, it's mind fuckery, because it's pimping. It's be like, yo, you don't deserve this, but you got it, so you better be happy. You with us, you better be happy, and this is what we want you to do. And it can be extremely convincing, because the things that are provided in privilege, So, but when these are presented, beneficial to be mindful that, oh, there went that freedom. So, anyways, that's the journey about that. Attachments, what the Buddha say. Attachments. What's that second path? What the second truth is? Gotta remember that word. How about that? Tanha, is it? Maybe somewhere around there. Tanha is one of them. Dukkha, remember that one definitely. Why that is in the hood parlance, it's kind of easy to remember that one. Dukkha is dookie. How about that? Anyway, when we talk about what's that term for remembering things? What's that term for remembering things? When people like associate sounds or whatever to remember things. It has a word. I mean, wow, what a paradox that is. I don't want to say paradox, but an irony, right? We'll say words. Anyways, words up. That's not how it goes, but that's cameo, making a cameo. Still on the further thing we talked about. Come on, we were saying to remember what we're talking about. There's something else to this. Oh, all right. Yeah, the second joint. All right. So that was the post-up. Now we're getting to the third thing. I was talking about heavy. So here we go. This is heavy. We're ready for it. Here we go. I think I did say this. I've said it. I've already shared it with Kinfolk before. It's comparatively recent, so I'm just going to say it again. So first we say, again, all things to praise the Most High Elohim, known by many names and beyond all names. Creator. Everything belongs to Creator, ultimately. From the beginning, all things are created by Creator. Everything goes back to Creator. Everything is eternally owned by Creator. Everything is controlled and decided by Creator. And that's beyond Brahma. This is Brahman, the oneness, the Most High, Creator. So, that's first, foundational. With that being said, within world civilization, there are these pretenses and illusions of ownership, land, property, territory, titles. And these pretenses are very functional in sharing, cooperating, controlling, conquesting, and otherwise. So along these lines, what we share is this truth, that until justice is properly reached, the children of the Middle Passage own the Atlantic Ocean. Hear me now. Until justice is properly reached, the children of the Middle Passage own the Atlantic Ocean. 100%. What does that mean? If you need to ask, you need to study. First, one thing is that children of the Middle Passage, very many children of the Middle Passage need a reminder and a tutorial about what the Middle Passage is, what the term Middle Passage is, what the experience of the Middle Passage is, what the narratives and stories and experience of the Middle Passage is, what the legacy, what the lessons, what the trod and the triumphs of the Middle Passage is. That's the children selves. And that being communicated amidst all the geopolitics, all the evolutions and technologies and conquests and imperialisms, the land grabs and exchanges and otherwise, pollutions and destructions, the Atlantic Ocean is owned by the children of the Middle Passage until justice is properly reached. Anyone traveling amidst the Atlantic Ocean, anyone traveling within the Atlantic Ocean, anyone traveling upon the Atlantic Ocean, anyone traveling over the Atlantic Ocean, any waves, any airwaves, any signals, any wires, any wireless, any transmissions, and otherwise, amidst, within, below, around, above the Atlantic Ocean, is the dominion of the children of the Middle Passage. Now, the children of the Middle Passage got a lot to do to get organized and properly hold that authority and responsibility until justice is properly reached. And that applies to all kinfolk of the earth, African, European, Mediterranean, Asian, native, and otherwise, mixed, and otherwise, all peoples, Atlantic Ocean, Middle Passage, until justice is properly reached. Now, one thing to wrap this up is this. We say, we might have said this before. Sometimes it's difficult at 4:47 in the AM to remember everything when people are sleeping and should be sleeping. How does oneself own waters that continually move? How does oneself own waters that continually move? And the further question, as we allude to a moment ago, is how do waters that continually move become one's own self? Hear me now. We give all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, and blessed love and peace in Rastafari.